Hello and welcome to the Beyond Limits podcast. I'm Jermaine Benjamin, one of the directors at Transition Partners, and this podcast is where we invite leaders from the talent, HR and culture sphere to discuss everything to do with attracting, retaining and developing people. Welcome to the Beyond Limits podcast, where we discuss everything to do with the working world of people and extending people beyond their limits. We discuss talent acquisition, retention, developing talent and people, and all things in between, culture, learning development, etc. Really excited today because I'm joined by Yasmin De Nardo from KPMG. So thank you very much for coming on my podcast. Much appreciated.
Thanks for inviting me. It's lovely to see you again after our D&I event a few weeks ago. So nice to continue the conversation.
Really enjoyed it. You did a good job of hosting.
I think it was a tough panel, but a good panel.
You threw a few tricky questions as well, didn't you?
I had to. It's my job. I think when I do a panel, and I think it's nice because when you do stuff like that, you have to kind of provoke conversations and make sure that you're kind of really pushing the boundaries.
I think one thing about when I met you and the panel and our discussions, there's something really authentic about you, and you're very comfortable challenging, I think.
I mean, I think had you have met me in my 20s, it would have been a different experience, but I think a lot of people would say that I came out of agency recruitment. I mean, no one comes out of university or school thinking I'm desperate to be a recruiter. It's like you fall into it, and I think when, as you'll know yourself, if you come from an agency, you can become quite hardened and that kind of very kind of tough and sales driven. So when I actually got my first job, but my first kind of internal recruitment job, outside of that, when I actually joined, I had to really adapt the way that I was, and I was quite direct. I think was a polite word. And I think I'm quite direct now, but I think it's one of those things that I always say to people, you learn over time, and one of the things that I've really not wanted to lose on my career is that authenticity, because if you're mentoring somebody, how can you mentor somebody if you're not being your true self, because you're telling them to be their true selves, or if you're not being your true self, how's that representative? Do you know what I mean? So
I do.
I feel like now that I'm in my late 30s, I'm really comfortable with who I am, and I think it's been a complete journey of growth and evolution and learning over the years. And I think if you're not constantly learning, and you always should be, whether you're in a senior leadership role, whether you're coming up from a graduate level, you always have to be learning, because that's where your growth happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that kind of stood out to me when I met you was, like I said, you were really comfortable challenging, and actually you were very assertive.
Yeah,
that's with a couple of team members, and I was like, oh. But actually, I really liked it, because it was just a bit like, wow, you're okay being you, and you're an assertive person. That's cool. I thought it was great. It was refreshing, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think now I've kind of learned to be assertive in the right way. And I think sometimes, I mean, my husband would tell you that, sometimes I can probably come across as, not brash, but I know what I want out of life, and I say things as they are, within reason, of course. But I don't want to give off an impression that it's not who I am, and I'm very similar at work, to be quite honest. So my personality, I think the one thing that you shouldn't dim throughout your career is your personality and that sense of who you are, because that can make you feel really downtrodden. And like you say, people do come to appreciate it. Don't get me wrong, it probably seems to a lot of people if you don't know me when you first meet me, I have a really hard exterior, but it's not, it's not really like that. I think first of all you do have to get to know me, And then second of all, as soon as you do get to know me, I'm the type of person that would do anything for anybody, and I think that kind of shows with all of like the extracurricular stuff that I do outside of my day job.
Yeah. And it's funny you should say that, because I did notice, that was one of the things that struck me when I met you, that you're very assertive, but actually I could tell as well that there was a real concern and care around people. Just really quickly, you gave off that vibe. Do you think that there's an element of almost an adaptation culturally that actually it's okay, like people should accept and appreciate and actually celebrate that there are some personalities that are assertive, and that's cool, that's good?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, I think if you go into, like, I'm working at KPMG at the moment, and I think there's a real perception out there of what it's like to work for one of the big four, and I was so pleasantly surprised when I joined. And one of the reasons why I joined was because of some of the people that I knew were there, and because of the interview I had with my boss. Like, he's amazing, but he's very different to what you would expect of someone at that level, and that made me feel comfortable. And he has let me be really autonomous, and he's trusted me completely. He's let me crack on and do what I need to do. He's trusted my experience and knowledge, and at no point has anybody ever turned around and said, oh, well, you should be a bit less like this. And it's like, it's that old saying, isn't it? If someone tells you to be less, well, go and find more. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, I would not accept that from anybody in my life. If I'm too much for you, ask yourself if you're enough for me.
Yeah, that's a fantastic way to look at it. And it's interesting you mentioned about the environment and the culture at KPMG, because I've worked in environments before where it's almost frowned upon that you're assertive, and it holds people back. And
I think part of it, honestly, has probably been driven by being a young female working in different businesses. So, for example, when I was, working at Jet2, I was really, really young, and I learned a lot while I was there, and part of that adaptation, and really sort of learned how to thrive in a fast-paced environment, which I then took with me to Skybet. But at Skybet, I felt that personality was really celebrated, and it was easier to be myself and to sort of, I really like fashion, and my kind of the way I dress is a way to express myself, or and it changes. And I think that's when I was kind of moving into that different culture, whereas it was quite corporate at Jet2, and it was starting when things were sort of, when a company grows, and there has to be that kind of development over the course of time. So Jet2 was growing, and it was becoming even more corporate, and for me at that time it was like, where can I grow here? I've been there for 5 years, I had 5 great years, I travelled loads, I did what I wanted to do, but I was thinking, like, I'm out of my bed 6 months of the year. I literally just wanted to have my feet on the ground for once. And I think one of the last things that I did was I had to go and recruit holiday reps in Greece, Cyprus, and like the Greek islands. I did 13 flights in 10 days. I came back and I was shattered, and I was like, I just literally cannot do this. And
it's not sustainable, is it? That?
No, it's not. And I think, to be fair, I was 29 at the time, and I was thinking, right, okay. And I know that might not sound old to some of our listeners, but when you've been kind of doing a job like that for a good 5 years, you think, right, what do I want, out of life? Is this what life I want for the rest of my life? And also, I don't think that they could have progressed me in the way that I wanted. I'd been there for a long time, and I think I sort of felt like because I joined when I was young, I felt like that was the perception that was kind of, I guess, cemented for me. And I think in order for you to go and do something else, you've got to go and carve it out yourself, right? So I think going to Skybet really sort of helped me to understand my fullest potential. I knew I had that potential, but I didn't feel like it was recognised or celebrated at Jet2. And it's not to say I had a bad experience. I absolutely didn't. I had a wonderful time there, but for my personal progression, I needed to move. And obviously, Skybet at the time was on a real spurt of growth from a tech perspective, just separated from Sky. I did really well in a really short space of time. And then I kind of you know, I think you get to a point when you're in internal recruitment, you're like, right, which way am I going to go? Am I going to go into kind of people ops? Am I going to go more of a HR route? So, you know, I'd been promoted to lead recruiter, I'd kind of got to that point, and then all of a sudden, I think my boss said to me, I've got a really exciting project for you. And I was thinking, hang on here a minute. Because when someone says that they've got something that is going to, you know, be good for your development, it's a sign to think about you actually going to get super busy and be given an absolute load of work.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, like, I can't, you know, I put my hand up for everything, and I'm still like that now, and it's bad. And we'll talk about later why it's bad. But that's what pushed me into the early talent space, like creating our graduate programs that we'd never had before, cementing us in the marketplace as an early talent employer of choice, like making sure that, you know, our applications were diverse. And for the first couple of years they weren't, because if you think of a business that is a tech business of which the product is sport, naturally going to get, you know, a lot of male applicants. So it's like, how can we attract like young females to this business? And in the third year we actually managed to get 60% of female offers just by, you know, I guess listening to what people were saying, like showcasing the female talent that we did have to make sure that we had that diversity, and I guess giving people the opportunity to use their own platforms as well. But I moved on. I actually took redundancy from Skybet, and it was, to be honest, it was like, at the time it was heartbreaking because I loved it there, but as I kind of referred to with Jack 2, the business was in the process of kind of going through the Stars Group situation, you know, and then things were changing quite a lot. So the graduate programs got scrapped, and you know, I was kind of hanging around for a while thinking, like, what do I want to do? What do I want to do? And I did kind of really have to have a think about it if I left, what was the right thing to do. And funnily enough, I was chatting to Johnny at the time. He was like, we need someone like you at KPMG. Bear in mind, this was a good 4 years ago, so the conversation has kind of been going on for that long, and now I'm actually there. But that's another story for another day, I think. But yeah, so you know, I'm quite risk averse when it comes to my career. So for me, choosing to take redundancy and not have anything to go to, because I didn't at the time, was a massive risk. You know, I was leaving a culture that I loved, although I could see things were changing. But I think one of the things that I've learned is that you have to trust your own instincts, and you have to trust that you are good enough, because if I'd not done that, I would not be where I am today. I wouldn't have had some of the great opportunities that I've done with Accenture, Channel 4, NHS Digital. Like, that was an amazing experience. And now KPMG, like, it just wouldn't have happened. And because I trusted myself, you know, and there was 7 weeks where I was like, is it going to happen? Am I going to get something else? And luckily, a lot of people know what I do within the Leeds talent space, and you know, a lot of people had kind of been sort of putting good words in for me, and I think that's what's important, especially for a future generation. You need to be, you know, part of, I guess, a community that's going to like shout your name in a room full of opportunities, because there's no one else going to do it. And I think it's important to be able to, you know, cement that. You've got to have those people that believe in you and back you up in any situation. And it was actually Natasha Saysalem, who works for Amazon. She recommended me to Accenture, and that was, you know, that was really great of her. And then it was Eve Roodhouse who kind of put me in touch with NHS Digital. And again, I'd been having similar conversations. So it's nice to, you know, have those people that will think of you in those situations, definitely.
And just, you know, there's so many interesting things that you say, and you know,
my husband might not agree,
but even as a personality, a little bit, I'd like to just touch upon your journey a little bit, because we touched upon this. We didn't really have a chance to speak about it when we were at the event recently. We spoke about kind of. I mentioned about having a challenging background, and you complemented that with talking a little bit about your own experience. Give us, you know, on the theme of diversity, on the theme of, you know, somebody like yourself who's come along such a journey and he's still on that journey.
Yeah.
How has that helped shape you, and where have you kind of come from?
So I think I come from a single parent background. I was first in my family to go to university, so first generation university student. And it's strange really, because I probably never really thought about it like that at the time, because that was the way that my life was. Like, my mum raised us, like, we both went to uni, both got out of Coventry, but I think from a really young age I had quite like a mature head on my shoulders, and I knew that I wanted to do something great. I think when I was 8 I said I wanted to be a lawyer or something. You know, I was reading like massive books when I was 4.
Right.
So I was really, you know, I was bright, and you know, I always wanted to do something with it, but I had a tough time at school.
Yeah.
You know, I got bullied. I felt like, you know, I couldn't really find my place. You know, I didn't really feel like I was in that, like super popular, you know, I was kind of in between, but I wanted to kind of work hard and do what I needed to do, and it was tough at the time, and there was some racial bullying as well, which can be really hard when you're a kid, and I think, you know, kids can be cruel, can't they? That's
Absolutely,
the thing, but, you know, I think it probably has shaped me in terms of who I am today. And then I did go to Leeds Uni, so I kind of moved here and ended up staying, obviously because I love it so much, so I'm like an honorary Leeds girl now. But
we've adopted you.
Yeah, definitely. But I think even, like, you know, my mum, as we grew up, she was just so resilient, and I think I've got a lot of that from her, and I bring that into my career, and she's always encouraged me to be the person who I am. Like, she's always kind of celebrated that with both of us. Like, my brother and myself are complete opposites. Like, he's so laid back that you would push him and he would fall over. Like, literally, he was like that as a child, and he's like that now, whereas me as a child, completely different. I was always like, again, very like assertive, and knew what I wanted out of life. So I don't feel like inherently I've changed. I've probably adapted to my surroundings. But I think, you know, from a leadership perspective as well, like, I take that authenticity and that resilience with me. So if I'm mentoring somebody, or if I'm talking, you know, to my grads or to my apprentices or to whoever it might be, that is something I always thread through the conversation about having that authenticity and resilience, and to sort of kind of push you in the right direction. We actually went to a school a few weeks ago, and it was that really bad period where we were having loads of snow, and 3 of my apprentices came up from London, and it was a school in Coventry, so that's where I grew up. And I was thinking, you know, we've got some apprentice opportunities in Birmingham. I was thinking that literally there are no opportunities for people in Coventry. Like, if you know, not for a young person, I don't think there are really. Like, what would somebody do? And I don't think that, you know, there's much awareness about the fact of what is out there, like, from a school perspective. So a lot of the work that I do involves going to schools and showcasing opportunities, or, you know, encouraging my early talent community to do that, and to sort of share that knowledge, so to speak. And again, I said the same thing when we spoke to a group of Year 12s, and honestly, I'm very used to public speaking now, but that was a really daunting experience. Like, really daunting, because I guess they're kind of at the age, aren't they, where they're trying to decide what they want to do for the rest of their lives, and you don't want to go in and, you know, talk at them, which we didn't, and we went in to sort of, you know, introduce them to the idea of a tech apprenticeship, and you know, I don't believe everybody does have to go to university to have a great career.
Absolutely.
I did, but I think it's because that was the option I had. I think there's so many more options out there these days for young people, not necessarily for young people as well. Like, if you want a career change, like, you know, reskilling, retraining, and there's so much that you can do now. Yeah,
and well, I've got a few questions for you around that, but there's just, you know, some of this is, most of the stuff we spoke about so far just isn't, we haven't planned it. It's just so interesting what you're talking about, and I just want to pick up on something around, I feel like what you're talking about, your personal experience, is really important for people to hear. You know, some similarities there. I was raised mum, single parent home. I've got 3 daughters, so I'm very much
You had 3 girls.
Yeah, 3 girls.
Oh, you're in for a treat.
Well, yeah, 2 of them are teenagers, so that's fun. But I am if it is right, I am a feminist in the sense of I love it. I want them to be, examples like yourself, and also, there's a comment. What I wanted to ask you, there's a comment that sometimes I've seen around before, around, it says, I think it's got a young girl, and they say she's bossy or something, or bossy boots, and it's like, well, what if it was a boy? It'd be like, he's driven or he's assertive, or like what's that? Yeah, like what's your opinion on that? And
we
how
could be here for hours.
But it's so important, especially coming from yourself. And what's your opinion on it? And how do you think we can move that forward?
I feel like the word feminist can come with really negative connotations.
Yeah.
And I think it's lovely to hear you say it, because we need allies, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's seen negatively. Is it because certain people feel threatened by, a strong woman?
Yeah.
That's part of it, I think.
You're absolutely right.
I think it's part of a societal norm. I think there's been so much that's happened for women in the past, I guess, few decades, in terms of go back to things like the right to vote. That seems crazy now, doesn't it, in terms of what we have now, what they didn't have, and all of the work that's gone into that. And I think now, you should encourage, a little girl knowing what she wants out of life. Like that's good. Like I don't. It's not bossy. Like my husband calls me bossy, but I am, and I know that, and I like it. And someone needs to be at the end of the day, because got to run a tight ship at home. But
stuff's got to get done.
Stuff's got to get done at my speed, preferably. But jokes aside, I think, I just think that it's like, girls have to wear pink, boys have to wear blue. It's like, why are we trying to put people in these boxes, and why are we trying to label people? Like, if you've got a little boy that's kind of a bit more reserved and laid back and takes a bit of time to find his feet, so what?
Absolutely.
You doesn't have to go and play football or do this, that and the other. Like, it does frustrate me that, there's still those comparisons floating around for women and men, or women are bossy, women are emotional. Like, if you got upset at work, and I have a few times, I'm not bothered about saying it, but I've gone to cry in toilets, not at my current role, but in my younger career days, I've had some really horrible experiences with male leaders making me feel like I wasn't worthy. And whatever you say, whatever way you want to spin it, it's because you're a woman and because they think they can make you feel intimidated. So is it okay then for a man to feel to be intimidated, but if you get upset by that makes you emotional?
Yeah, you can't win either way. Yeah.
So what? But it's okay for a man to be intimidating. But if a woman was seen to be intimidating, you'd say she was aggressive.
Yeah.
So what can we do? We're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Like, I feel incredibly lucky to be surrounded by some really incredible females in our industry. Who are really trying to pave the way, and I would consider myself now as part of that group. But I have that support around me. So people like Sarah Tulip, Hannah Sutton, Zandra, Deb Hetherington. Like, I'm really lucky to be able to call them friends. And now that obviously we're doing our Future Voices event tonight, and I think one of the things that we really recognised at Wild was the fact that it's always the same people speaking, like doing the same thing. Like, I love public speaking, but if somebody else can have the opportunity to do it, go for it. So, for example, that I'm mentoring Ray, and as soon as the spot came up, I was like, right, it's your turn. One of my apprentices who came to the dinner last year, she's doing it tonight, and I just think that I'm so excited to see what these people have to say, because I think we have now got a lot to learn from the next generation coming up. And I think if you're not using your experience to carve the way for other people, that's not right. There's not enough of us out there, and it's like there aren't enough role models for young women, and this is why I feel like it's important to keep going into schools. You know, it's lovely to have been celebrated so much in the last month in terms
got your nomination.
I've been nominated for Thank you. I was so chuffed.
Deserved.
Women in Tech UK Awards, so Outstanding Advocate for Women in Tech, and then I've had a couple of nice Leeds List articles, so Most Inspirational Woman or Women in Tech. So yeah, I've had loads of coverage the last few weeks. I feel incredibly popular, but it's nice because sometimes it can feel like we're really like, I don't know, like everybody works so hard, and sometimes you just feel like you just keep going. And I always think,
schools and giving an example for the next generation coming through.
Yeah, because I do really, I guess, take with me every day, like you can't be what you can't see. And it sounds like such a simple phrase, but there are a lot of people out there, like, you know.
I love that phrase, yeah.
It's true, because like, you know, how are you going to carve out a career in an industry that you know, there's no representation of yourself in?
Absolutely.
You know, and I think that's why it's so important for, you know, me in my role, but also encouraging other people to go into schools and show younger people that actually you can achieve this, you know, particularly from a social mobility perspective and, you know, inclusion, diversity and equity perspective. I think there's so much more to diversity and inclusion than, well, we have to, you know, I might be a champion for women in tech and females in the industry, but it's about everybody, and it's about everyone being able to show up and be themselves and also have that representation, because like we know, you're not going to get that diversity of thought in the business if you're pipelining the same talent through your business. But I think it's getting much harder. You know, we've been in, you know, a digital skills crisis for a really long time. And this is why, you know, I've been kind of working with the school that I'm a governor at to teach years 5 and 6 Python on the curriculum. So KPMG have been going in and doing that. So some of my engineers, which is really great. And obviously we're going to try and see if we can roll that out to years 3 and 4. Because this is part of the problem. They haven't got access to the type of skills to prepare them for the future. How are we supposed to prepare kids for roles that don't even exist yet? So this is why it has to start where it does. It's almost too late to be pipelining people out of university and college, because at that point people have made that decision. So it's how can you get more stuff on curriculum? How can you make sure the education piece is right? And with all the kind of the resource challenges at the moment, I do think that there's a lot of reliance on businesses, and you know, obviously it's part of our corporate social responsibility, but for me it's more than that. It's a genuine problem, and you know, we can't complain if we're not going to go and try and do something about it. So I'm really passionate about the education sector, and it's also why we run or why I created the Kids Code event for KPMG. So we did one last year for the Leeds Digital Festival, and it was an absolute sellout. So Anna brought her kids, like there were loads of people, and they learnt like Python and Scratch for the day, learnt to build like an emoji confetti cannon and to drive remote control cars, and everyone was like, wow, when's the next one going to be? And like, people just loved it, and I think it's good for the parents, because if your parents don't work in that industry, then how are you know, it's quite difficult for, you know, for people to access. And, you know, technology isn't for everybody. I think it is for everybody in terms of like this digital. I think, of course, we want it to be for everybody. But in terms of a career in technology, not everybody's going to want to do that, and not all parents will have a career in technology, despite, you know, our day-to-day lives being, you know, pretty much
driven
or controlled by technology, right? But you know, you can't expect all of the parents to know absolutely everything about what's available. Like if I'd asked my mum, you know, she wouldn't have known. So I do think we've got a bit of a responsibility, not just to educate the kids, but to educate the parents so they feel comfortable about talking about pathways for their kids or understanding a bit more. And you know, we had loads of people come and they were like, wow, really enjoyed this. I learnt so much, never mind the kids.
Tell us a little bit more about that then, because that's really interesting.
Yeah, so
there's probably other people who might listen to this.
Yeah, so we do basically some of our engineers have like crafted some programs to take into schools and help kids to code. And I just thought it'd be a really good idea to run it as like an event, an in-person event in our offices. And basically they move around tables and they learn at each stand, and we give them what we call like a little tech passport, and they collect stickers.
Oh, wow, okay.
And whoever completes the challenges first,
What age is this?
8 plus.
Okay.
So we say it's best for 8 plus. So we had a real range of people coming from sort of 8 years old. Johnny brought his little girl, but I think she did only come for the stickers, which was fine because I was happy to oblige. Up until like 13, 14, so I think it's accessible to everybody. And I think it's a really nice way to, I guess it's about those interactions with children as well and different people, so bringing people together, because I do think as, you know, in general, I think we're all guilty of doing a lot of stuff virtually or doing stuff, you know, behind our phones. Like, oh, you want grocery shopping? I can just order it on my phone. I don't have to see anybody. But I'm really, you know, passionate about the value of face-to-face connection, particularly when it comes to my early talent. It's like, it's not just about being able to do the job, it's building those relationships and, you know, driving, you know, your personal brand forward in a business. How do you want to represent yourself? Who do you want to be? And you need to kind of be in and around the office to do that. And I think we're all still adjusting, you know, post-pandemic hangover, isn't it?
Absolutely. You touched upon the academy and the work that you've done there. Could you tell us a little bit more about the academy work that you've done at KPMG and previously at NHS Digital? And there's probably 2 parts to that question, kind of what you've done around that and how that is moving forward, the inclusion work that you're doing and what you're trying to do.
So I think I joined NHS Digital to help to rebuild their academy. They already had something in place, and it's much harder to go in and try and rebuild.
So what is the academy? Just to take a step back for anybody who's thinking like, hey, what's, you know.
How I think it's perceived in the tech world is if you've got like an academy, we would perceive that as a group of early talent that come through that path. And
that isn't necessarily age, is it, early talent?
No.
Is it?
Well, no. So an academy, how I would want an academy to be really is our different routes that come into the business would be our early talent, returners, retrainers, and you come through that academy. And not only is it a place for, I guess, you to your career path from a talent perspective as you come in at that level, but it's a place where you should learn, grow, develop with the business, have that wraparound support. So it's quite a big job. And then any learning and development that maybe happens when you join a graduate scheme or an apprenticeship. So for example, if you go onto a boot camp, that would be managed through the academy, or that's how I've always termed it anyway. And a lot of businesses do have academies where they train people and then they do something for them when they come on board, because at NHS Digital, they had something called the NHS Academy, but it was often confused with the Leadership Academy, which was an NHS England thing at the time, so very, very confusing. But we were trying to sort of, I was redefining the pathways for people coming in because it was a little bit inconsistent, and also enhancing that journey. So how are we retaining people? How are we making sure they're learning the skills that they need to learn to do their jobs well? You know, when you start your first job and you're coming onto a graduate scheme or an apprenticeship, it must be pretty, you know, it must be pretty daunting. Like, you're either coming straight from school where you've got very little experience, or you're coming straight from uni where you might have had a few part-time jobs, or you might have done an internship, but really coming into a corporate business, different world, and they need that level of support. So unfortunately, when I got to NHS Digital, within 3 weeks we'd gone virtual because of the pandemic. So I know. So, and I'd literally just started. I barely knew anybody, and I was like, I've got a really big job to do here. But you know, I worked really closely with a lot of the senior leadership. I had, you know, a really good team, and I think more importantly, what people forget when they are dealing with academies or early talent is, you know, what drives that is the opinion of the people actually in it. So not making decisions for them without having their input. So I think it's easy to say the grads need this, or the apprentices need that. And it's like, well, have you asked them? Do you know what's going on the ground? Like, have you spoken to them? Because you've got to. So the first thing that I did when I've been into both NHS Digital and KPMG is gone, right, I want to meet as many people as possible from the early talent community. I'm going to start setting up regular catch-ups with people so I can understand what's going on, what are the bugbears, like what are the frustrations, what are the real big problems, like what do I need to solve first? And I think that all becomes apparent quite quickly. You sort of go in with an idea because you know when you go to do a job like that you're usually going to be building or rebuilding, right? So I was more than prepared, but the problems can tend to vary from each business dependent on what happens. So obviously it's a bit of a different challenge in NHS Digital because we went into a pandemic and obviously that causes a lot of, you know, how many mental health issues did that cause for people?
Oh gosh,
So we created like a health and wellbeing community for our early talent where we did stuff like we all, I guess, got together and did like meditations and we ran happiness and wellness surveys just to make sure we could temperature check people because I think they were the people that were affected the most. So thinking of people that had, you know, kind of done uni virtually and then they'd come in and started a graduate scheme virtually. So doing the first virtual induction was a real big achievement because everything had been face-to-face before. You know, launching a virtual assessment centre process, like it seemed beyond the wit of man at the time, but you think about it now, it's something that we do every day. So I think there has to be a real appreciation for how much we actually did get done during that time, virtual or not. That whole, you know, the new employer value proposition for early careers, the new website, all the new videos that we did at NHS Digital, we did it and launched it all still in like tier 4 lockdown. Like that's incredible. That's an incredible job and we got some incredible people and it was, you know, it was a really new process, but I was so lucky to have the right people on my side at the time to be able to get it done. And that's really important when you go into any workplace. Like, have you got that support? Have you got the people that will back you? Can you get on autonomously? Like, I'm pretty good at going in and understanding what needs to be done. I just like to get on with it. And you've got to adapt that dependent on where you go. Again, same situation. I went into KPMG, did the same thing. So I always take my own methodology because I feel confident enough in my expertise in this area now. Like, if I can go in and look at something and be like, right, okay, and I can put it together in a different way now.
You know what good looks like.
I know what good looks like, but I also know how to pull it together in a way that's going to speak to, you know, speak to the right people and different stakeholders. So I think that's important and knowing how to adapt from one business to the next because NHS Digital or NHS England as they are now and KPMG, two different businesses. But it's just, you've just got to adapt, and I think it's also good for your growth and making sure that, you know, you've got I feel like I've got a really good range of experience within these different businesses, and I did the same thing, like I said, 4 weeks, presented back to, you know, my boss and our COO, and was like, this is what I think needs to be done, this is what I want to do now, this is what's really urgent, and they were like, right, okay. And it obviously wasn't as simple as that, but they were pretty much like, you know, I've just kind of done what I needed to do and cracked on in the background. Exactly. But, you know, and then it's thinking, I think the one thing that I do forget, I'm probably not as good at, is thinking about my own development. I just kind of naturally fall into things, and I think it's really easy to go at such a rate of knots that you're not making that time for yourself. Like, you know, my husband always says, like, you need to start, like, cutting back on some stuff, like, this is why you're getting ill. And I was like, I can't, like, I physically can't do it. And he's like, because I'm a board member at Maggie's with Sandra, so I introduced her, which was really important to me with, like, losing my dad a couple of years ago.
Oh, sorry about that.
And then I'm obviously at Wild, which I really enjoy.
Governor stuff.
School governor. I've got something else coming up. So my husband was like, you've got to drop something.
Something's got to give.
And I was just like, I know. And then I was like, oh yeah, I'm doing another kids code on Saturday. I think he's just given up, to be honest. Like, you know, then I'm doing an event on Saturday at my gym. because I think we've done so much celebration around International Women's Day. I think it's great, obviously, to celebrate people and to celebrate women, but I think we shouldn't forget there's women out there that still need like help and support. So I've set up like a 75-minute like event at the gym of boxing and weights.
Oh, wow.
And we're doing it to raise money for support after rape and sexual violence leads.
Okay. Wow.
So there's 12 girls going to be on it.
Yeah.
We're going to be, you know, punching away, and everyone's probably not going to want to be my friend after. But just stuff like that I just think gives the extra. Like, if I get an idea, I'm like, right, I want to do it now, and this time I'm going to do it. And I'm lucky I've got a lot of people around me that support me to like get things done. But you know, that is kind of the example in terms of what I could do turn down. Like, I had school governors this morning, and there's always something going on, like in my life. But I just think that's something that you adjust over time.
And do you feel as a personality that you almost need that? Like, you need to be spinning plates?
I think I've always, I thrive off that pressure. I definitely have, I feel like I've relaxed a lot. I think if you asked other people, they'd be like, no, absolutely not. But I feel in myself,
Yeah.
I guess I've calmed down a lot, because I'm very, you know, I'm very level-headed. I'm really organised, and I think that helps. I think the one thing that I don't compromise on is my exercise, because I have to, you know, I like to get that in. It's when you went for your run at lunch, didn't you?
Yeah, it helps, doesn't it?
It just, you know, it really kind of levels me out. Like, you know, I eat well, all that kind of stuff. I have to have my sleep. You know, I don't drink anymore, and I haven't for a good while now. And I do think it's all part of, you know, growing into yourself and knowing what works for you and what doesn't. And that was a really big thing for me, like, because as you know, like a lot of socialising or a lot of events that happen, they seem to be around alcohol.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you know, that can be difficult at first, but I am comfortable with who I am, and I'm comfortable with my decisions, and being, you know, assertive about them, and being like, well, you know, that's who I am now. And I do think that all of the stuff that's happened over the years has, I guess, carved me into the person that I'm meant to be. I feel like probably for the very first time in my life, and this is really transparent, I feel like I am operating at like my highest possible level.
Wow, that's amazing. Like
my best possible level.
Yeah.
And also, like, I feel like I'm the best person, not just for those around me, but for myself. Like, I feel comfortable and content with myself, and that's something that, you know, at 36 to 37, like, that's quite, you know, it's a big thing to say, and to get to that point, like, I'm not self-actualising or anything like that, definitely not. But that's really important to me, that I feel comfortable with who I am, and I don't have to hide any parts of myself, like, wherever I am.
Yeah. And do you know, just on that theme, and I absolutely love, like, how genuine you are. I
don't think I can help it. I don't think it's a flaw, but I just think I really do speak from, you know, I say,
it's from the heart.
I mean, it is,
yeah.
and I've learned to temper it, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But everything with me comes from a good and genuine place. Like, I'm only ever out to, like, help people. And I think sometimes, you know, for my faults, I can probably want to help too much, which relinquishes that self-focus, which I should probably have more. Like, am I looking after myself? Am I burning myself out for the sake of, you know, other people? Well, yes and yes, quite a lot of the time. But actually, one of my really big things over, you know, that I promised myself at the start of the year in my journal and my gratitude book, was to say no to more stuff and, like, protect my peace and my energy. Like, if you'd asked me 18 months ago if I liked being in on my own and having my own space, I'd be like, oh my god, no. Now, honestly, I can't live without it. So if my husband's like, oh, I'm going to go out for like a couple of drinks with my friends, I'm like,
yeah.
Like, no offence, like, I love him, but if you're both working at home as well, I do think it's important that you need that time apart to be your own person. And that's a really big self-development point for me. Like, I think I know now what I need to operate at my best. And I think as a leader and as a person, you need to be comfortable with that. And it's difficult. It's like a journey of, like, constant growth.
I'm going to come back to you on your gratitude book. That's interesting. But I want to ask you, and this is just really the benefit of many other people. I think a lot of people really struggle with being able to be themselves.
Yeah,
and looking back on yourself, remember when you was a bit younger, sometimes you had to adjust, and looking back on your younger self, or somebody talking about young women who are up and coming, what advice would you give to a younger you, or to somebody else who is still finding out who they are, and like how to navigate through that and get to that point?
Not have listened for a start. She probably will. Yeah, she wouldn't have listened younger me, so I don't think we would go to her. I mean, what I think is really important not to do is to look back and have regrets. It might sound a bit well, obviously, but I always.
No, it's an important
point. No, I always sort of say
do.
like I don't regret things. I feel like I've learned from them. Like there's some things that I wish that I'd done differently, or different decisions that I've made, but I do really strongly believe that it all brings you to the point you're supposed to be at.
Yeah.
Like otherwise you wouldn't have that life experience, or you wouldn't have made those mistakes. Like you are going to go through life making mistakes, I think is what I would say. Sometimes you have to make mistakes to get to that point. It's okay to fail, like it totally is. Like I think I got something wrong this week and I did not let it go for like 2 days, and no one was bothered about it, but I was, because I'm a perfectionist and it is very rare for me to do that. So that then made me think, right, am I doing too much? Do I need to pull back? And I think it's just about asking yourself those questions, like make sure that you're always reflecting on where you are. Like don't get so caught up in life that you rush through it, which I tended to do. Like honestly, I still feel about 22. That's the problem, and I'm 37 next week, and I've got a super good memory, so I remember everything. Like I can't remember what I was doing last night, but I heard a song and it just took me back to it takes you back to a memory, and I was just like, that literally doesn't feel like 5 minutes ago. So the one thing that I would say is that what you cannot get back is time. And I've learnt that a lot over the last, couple of years. Like I said, after losing my dad and then having such an amazing year last year, getting married, a new job, and you just forget. And I always think I get a bit sentimental like this time of year, because I'm very reflective when it comes up to my birthday, and I'm like, but this year I feel different. I don't feel like it's like, oh my god, I need to do this, or oh my god, I need to rush and do the next thing. I'm a bit like, I'm happy with where I am. I'm content. Like I've got a wonderful husband, a wonderful family, like everything is touch wood good, right? But if I was going to give myself some advice, I'd probably say like stop rushing through life, like take more time to appreciate where you are rather than on where you're going. Life's a journey, not a destination, which I think is a good one. And it's true, because what are we rushing for? The other thing I'd say is, if you're in a culture that encourages you to work to that burnout point, that is not the right culture for you. Like I've been there, I've done that, right? But you're not going to be on your deathbed thinking, oh my god, I wish I'd worked till 10 o'clock on that night to achieve this. No, you'll have wished that you'd have gone out and created memories, or that you'd gone on holiday. Like you overworking is not going to get you anywhere quicker, but it will make you burn out quicker. And I think that's what you need to remember. So for me to be at my best self, and for those around me, and for whoever it is, you don't push yourself to burnout. Like if you want to kind of get in the right places, open up, like be yourself. Like I hate saying networking, but it's one of those things that's been really I guess crucial to kind of cementing a place within the community and building that network around me. Like I'm really excited about seeing the next level of people come through. Like, do you know what I mean? Like that's really exciting to me, because I absolutely love seeing other people do well. And I think when you're a woman, it's very easy to compare yourself to others around you. Like life is not a competition, right? We're all supposed to be supporting each other equally. But because I think there's fewer of us in this space, it can feel like, actually, is there space for everybody? Yeah, there is space for everybody. That is the whole point. There's so much more space than you could know. Like, you don't, I consider myself a woman in tech, but do I code? No.
Absolutely.
It doesn't necessarily mean that, and I actually think it can put people off. So I think one of the things that I would say is not to let, you know, things on face value, I guess, deter you. Like, ask questions, be bold, like, don't be afraid to be assertive, if that's what you want to call it. Like, don't feel like because you're in a different position, we have a responsibility in our working life to be able to influence upwards, right? You know,
absolutely,
even whatever level you're at,
absolutely.
You know, it's not that influence, just it.
So yeah, you were mentioning about how important it is to influence up.
Yeah, because I think that's what, I guess, how can, you know, the people at the top, so to speak, understand what's going on the ground if you're not trying to influence upwards? And I think sometimes people can become set in their ways, so it's important for you to kind of challenge that and to be okay with challenging it as well. Like, I'm very, as you said at the start, I'm very comfortable challenging. If I know it's the right thing to do, I wouldn't do it for the sake of it, but I'd do it because I think it's the right thing to do, or I've got a genuine question, or a genuine concern, or I'll pick something up, because more often than not you'll see something that somebody else doesn't.
I want to go back to this gratitude.
Tell us
about that.
So I started journaling probably at the start of last year, because I knew I had a really stressful year coming up, and I knew it was a really good way to kind of balance my thoughts and not be kind of, you know, going to bed at night and thinking, oh my God, I've got to do this. And obviously planning a wedding and a wedding abroad, you know, I'd not long lost my dad, you know, I had a million different things going on. So I find it's a really good way, and it's a good habit to get into, to reflect on your thoughts. You know, I used to do it every night, and I do think you should get in a routine of doing it every night, but now I'm kind of more like every few days. Like, I'll know that if I'm feeling a bit like wobbly, or if I've had a really good day, I'll be like, right, I need to journal, because I love looking back and reflecting. And I think the key is, for me, it's reflection, because if I looked back a year ago and I kind of compared it to now, I know how much that I've grown and I've changed. But it's nice to have a little memory of that, and I think it's important to be grateful. And I don't just mean, oh, I'm like grateful. It's like, what does gratitude really mean? Well, when you have that first cup of coffee, but gratitude is actually when you appreciate what it's taken to get that coffee in your hands, like the people who, you know, ground the beans or whatever. Like, it goes that far, and that really pushes that level of gratitude far. So I always try and think of it like that, and I think I've become, I think in my contentness, like, I'm really grateful for the little things. Like, you know, I find my happiness in like chilling with my husband, and, you know, spending time with my friends, or, you know, going to the gym, or, you know, being around dogs, whatever it is. Like, I find happiness in the smallest notes. It's like when I said yesterday that I've just smiled at something, and I was like, they're the moments that are important, the moments that you think aren't going to be life defining, but it's when you feel your best, like when you're at your happiest and your most content. Like, I just feel incredibly lucky to do a job that I love, get to work with a load of amazing people, but also make a difference. I think for me, what I've really wanted to do from when I was really young is make a difference to people, and I hope that that's something that I am doing.
Yeah, absolutely, and the community work and moving leads forward from a tech perspective. I just probably wanted to finish on, because I could talk to you all day, Yasmin. On back to the academy stuff.
Yes.
If you know, that is a real specialism of yours.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to anybody who wants to implement an academy, or revamp it, I suppose? It's quite difficult to answer that revamp bit, because you need to know the business, but
I think,
what would you suggest?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that I would say that I have found is that from the businesses that I've moved around in, it is a very specialist, it's a very specialist thing to do. So I think you need to have somebody who knows the ins and outs of early talent and what to do, somebody who has been there, done it before, and know what you want to achieve. Like, what kind of growth do you want to achieve? What kind of talent do you want to attract? Like, you know, is this going to be like a future leaders program? Is this going to be the crux of your talent moving forward? Like, it's not something to really, it's a really important decision, because when you're I guess building something like this and bringing people into it who are fresh in their careers, I think people don't really understand that it's different to managing somebody who's experienced. It takes a different level of care, a different level of, I guess, you know, management through that kind of career path, and you need your people within the business to be prepared for that. And I find that's been a mistake a lot of businesses tend to make when they want something and they want to implement it, but actually you've got to have, I guess, the internal operational structure to be able to manage these people and to understand what they need and why they need it and how. Like, I think, you know, it's all well and good saying, I want to start a grad programme. Okay, well that's great, but what does that mean for the future? Like, where are these people? What's their journey? Where are they going to go afterwards? Like, what have you got planned for them? And people don't think like that. It's just more of a now situation, and not necessarily at the last, you know, I'm speaking about businesses in general, not anybody specific, but I think it's something that has to be very carefully considered and thought of, and I find that a lot of businesses don't do that, and that's where, you know, you get a bad experience. Like, it's all about that brand and making sure that your brand is represented. And one of the things that's important is if you're representing a culture, you know, externally and in a shop window, right? If that doesn't then, and as we talked about on the D&I event, if that doesn't represent or align internally, you'll be found out straight away and people will just leave, and that's not what you want. You know? So you've got to have everything levelled out internally before you even consider it. I think that's the mistake that people make. And having a leadership team that really believe in the benefit of early talent, because I've worked in businesses that I've been lucky to have that leadership team that really do believe in the value that they bring. I think it's where you get that disconnect in terms of we need as opposed to we want to grow.
I see, it's a different mentality almost.
Yeah, and that's what, and I just think a lot of the places I've been have just needed a few tweaks to make things right.
Yeah.
But you know, you have that mentality. It's people first mentality, not business first. Like, obviously, business requirements have got to be considered, but also the impact of having these people operationally. Is the business ready for that?
Brilliant, thank you. Yasmin, you've been fab.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. If anybody wants to connect with Yasmin, drop Yasmin a LinkedIn connection.
Yeah,
that's
sure.
Okay.
Said it now.
Too late.
Said it now.
Loads of messages coming, but any questions, follow up, please email me, Jermaine.Benjamin at transition-partners.co.uk. I've got my email address. Thank you so much for
Thank you so much for having me. Cheers. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for listening to the Beyond Limits podcast. If you have any questions that we can answer at all on the podcast going forward, or if you would be interested in being a guest on the podcast, please email me directly at jermaine.benjamin at transition-partners.co.uk. Thanks again.